My name's Matt, and I've spent my life devoted to mastering card games. Mainstream or obscure, there was no time commitment or expense too great. But most Magic players can't afford to do what I did. Because of this, I have been given a challenge. New arena account, no spending allowed, and a limited amount of playtime. Can I be competitive without spending a dime? This is FreePlayer. This week started like the one before it, with the grind. Our goal was the same as it's been: build a collection, get some wild cards, think ahead to the deck that we're going to build. But I started to notice some slowdown on the ladder. I'm losing far more than I'd expect in gold. Getting my 4 wins a day is becoming extremely difficult, especially since I'm allocating so little time to deck building. I spent the first day ramming my head against the wall, beating opponents by sheer force of will. Then, I remembered the advice that I gave at the beginning of this challenge. If I were going to give people starting tips, the first one would be this. I wouldn't say that advice was wrong, per se, but the matchmaking rating takes your rank into account, and having no collection doesn't excuse you if you're a better player. I could waylay this by severely cutting my MMR by losing 100 times in a row, but the answer lies in the advice that I gave. So there's no reason not to test your decks there, unless you are not hitting 4 wins a day. I took a deep breath and I moved into play queue. The differences in the decks I face are stark. There's no shortage of meta decks or competitive players in play queue, but there's also nothing to lose by conceding. Seeing a game to the end isn't immutable here, so we can end a game early if things don't seem to be going well. And based on most research, conceding early will make it so that I have an easier time on the ladder later on, if I do actually have to concede. I don't. We switch over to the black-green deck Back for More, with a few modifications to it. I took out 4 Jungle Hollows for 4 Witherbloom campuses, and I took 2 Deadweights out of the deck, making room for a Deadly Brew and a Witherbloom command. Recursion decks are more suited to my playstyle, and wins start to come a little more quickly. We'll likely continue in the play queue for now. Until we build something that's a little better, getting to platinum is not a necessity. There's some interesting quirks about the play queue. It's kind of like playing Magic sideways. I've run into some very cool free play decks, mostly focusing around the colleges in Strixhaven. In play queue, synergy overrides rarity by a wide margin, much wider than you might see in competitive play. For instance, I played against an Emergent Ultimatum deck that was makeshift. Somebody just cobbled it together out of the rares that they had. Now normally this deck depends on rares, but if you don't have all of these rares, Emergent Ultimatum doesn't find anything of use. I mean, it can, but it's not going to. Not consistently. I dispatched that deck with my starter deck up-jumped just a little bit without any problems. A much harder deck for me to beat was the Witherbloom Remembrance deck that uses Bastion and a bunch of token creators to just drain you completely out of life. That deck basically uses no rares and depends entirely on powerhouse uncommons and commons to get to where it needs to go as quickly as it can, and stalling out the rest of the time. Long term, a good free player will use the tools that they have ready to them rather than bemoan the fact that they don't have the rares needed to build a high level meta deck. The next day, we hit a 500 gold sale in the shop, pushing us into enough for another quick draft. I find myself in a conundrum when paring down my deck, a problem that I face quite often. I get down to a playable 42 and then struggle to get it down to the nice round 40 that most people play. And then I do what I always do. Run it as 42. Some would say that there's no excuse to making your deck bigger. It only lowers your chances of drawing what you need. However, for me, 42 is what I'm comfortable with to start. Here's my reasoning. Arena gives you 2 chances to lose before you're out. If I'm unsure what cards I need to cut out, playing 2 games, even if I lose both of them immediately, gives me an opportunity to see what cards work and what cards don't. And in a limited format, the difference between 40 and 41 cards, maybe even 42, is mathematically different, but I'm only adding cards that add gas to the deck. If I'm running a low curve, that means I'm only adding more answers. Now, I never get as brave to run like 44, but I feel really comfortable in the 42 range. And it turns out that my greed in this case was rewarded, getting us another 850 gems for our troubles. Conversion rate up, I start my long work week just in time for F&M Challenger decks. Any Friday Night Magic event involving precons is an automatic plus for free players. This is a format where players must choose between decks that can't be changed and are relatively the same power level. This means getting the 2 wins for the 2 rares that you won in your prize pool is much more dependent on skill, not your card pool. It also means, if you're a good enough player, you can farm up more than your typical number of wins in a day. The chance of running into a bad matchup is nearly non-existent, so one can play to their heart's content, which is what one did. Another event also showed up, the College Challenge, which asked of us a singleton deck and a fee to earn cosmetics. Now, as a paying player, I actually love these cosmetics. It gives me something to spend my money on if I want to, and rewards me in a way that I can enjoy. I wish the events themselves had some free way to play, maybe something with no rewards, so the whole community could gather and have fun with these events. As a new free player, I don't have the gems or the gold to indulge in something that doesn't give me cards. We finished the week out with a Skyclave Apparition, practically a staple for white decks in Arena. We might need to reassess the power of the uncommon and the common. Finn the Fangbearer is an extremely inexpensive build and is showing some promise. Maybe there's something there. I guess we'll have to wait and see.